Hi you guys, welcome to another episode of Ask the Egg Whisperer. I have a new format, and the format is when you guys have a question, you send it in to asktheeggwhisperer.com. This makes it so much easier for me so I don't miss answering your questions. It breaks my heart that I get so many questions from all over, and when I don't answer them, I get really annoyed with myself. And I don't like being annoyed with myself. So please feel free to use that. Go to asktheeggwhisperer.com, and then there's a form that you just fill out, send your question in, and I'm gonna do my best to answer every single question that you guys sent in today. And for questions that I didn't get to, I am so sorry, but then tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I'm gonna be doing Ask the Fertility Expert, and I'll be chit-chatting with Dr. Catherine Dhea, and I'm so excited to do that. So thank you guys for joining me today, and I'm so looking forward to getting to all of your questions. I'm gonna go ahead and start here in about 2 seconds. So how are you guys enjoying the zombie apocalypse out there? So for those of you who are living in California, I feel like I'm battling zombies on my way into work, on my way into doing my transfers, on my way back to the office. It's quite a trip out there. And so I was thinking to myself, you know, the only thing harder than being a fertility patient right now is being a fertility patient right now during a zombie apocalypse. I'm telling we sit here and crack jokes all day long. I know it's not that funny, but let me tell you, the humor really helps. My mom said to me, are people still coming in because they want to have babies during the apocalypse? And I'm like, people want babies more than ever right now because we are still sparkling inside. I know, super cheesy. You guys are probably dry heaving at how freaking cheesy I am. It's like looking like the end of the world out there, and I'm sitting here wearing this pink dress, and I had to put it on because I had to, and then my pink lipstick or whatever the heck color this is. You know what I mean? I feel like with what's going on outside, I have to be that much more annoyingly positive, that much more annoyingly strong and resilient for all of my patients, because hot damn, this stuff is so, and I just came up with that word, I never say that. This stuff is so hard to be dealing with miscarriages, stillbirths, fertility struggles, relationship issues, and then put that on top of everything else that we're dealing with. So I hear you, I see you. I would like to share all the information I possibly can for you guys to feel empowered so that as a fertility patient, you know exactly what to ask your fertility team so you can get the very best care possible. Okay, so stay for some fertility education. Hopefully you'll be hearing lots of fertility jokes along the way. As you know, I have no idea what I'm going to say, but we're going to have a really, really good time. Okay, so let's get to a really nice question here. Enormous gratitude for all your time, enthusiastic dedication, positivity, and hard work to help others in so many ways to have miniature humans. Miniature humans sounds really cute. I've loved every minute. Actually, speaking of the word cute, I actually saw someone, her name is Cuterus. That's her like cute uterus. I thought that was really cute on Instagram, Cuterus. She's a OBGYN in Europe. I've loved every minute of the obsessive hours I've spent watching your videos. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one obsessed with fertility. General ERA query. I have a query about the ERA test, which is only used for the FET. If you can transfer too early or too late and message us the hours of progesterone exposure of the endometrium precisely for an FET, then why is an ERA not useful to inform when transfer fresh embryos? Could you not transfer too early or may need to adjust post-collection progesterone even for a fresh cycle transfer? Then again, naturally the embryo is supposed to hang out in our uterus for days until it can implant. So how much of a factor did this timing play, and why is fresh so different from frozen for timing of transfer? And the answer is fresh isn't so different than frozen for timing of a transfer. It's just that there's only a window around day 5. The uterus, the receptors are long gone day 6 for most people. For some people, they might be present. And so that could possibly be a reason why you may not have implantation from a fresh transfer, because you didn't transfer in the right window for your body. So I know, I don't know if that makes sense, but the reality is that the window of implantation makes a lot of difference for fresh and for frozen, in my humble opinion, of course. And that's why some people think that with the frozen, you have more control, and you can still do an ERA test with a natural cycle transfer. But for the most part, you know, you can transfer on day 3 and get implantation. You can transfer on day 5 and get implantation, but you can't transfer on day 6. You know, I talk about doing an embryo transfer and thinking of it as like that timing is like an invitation to an embryo party or embryo transfer party. One day there will be embryo transfer parties, I'm sure of it. But my point is that if you show up too late for that party, those tables and chairs, they're going to be picked up and there's not going to be anyone in the convention hall there. Like there's going to be no one. You're going to walk in and it's going to be empty. So when it comes to an embryo and putting it in the uterus, the transfer window does matter. So that's why we don't transfer past day 5. Great question. Okay, here's another question. Hi, I just saw that you will go live in a couple hours. I hope you can address my questions. I have endometriosis, MTHFR. My husband has no issues. We ran tests. Trust me, he probably has issues. Just kidding. You know what I mean. No one doesn't have issues. Come on. I have my issues. My husband knows what they are. My issues have to do with like some toothbrush things that I do that drive him nuts, and I purposely do it because I know they drive him nuts. I'm sure he has issues. Okay. I did a miscarriage panel after the second transfer. First transfer, 2 embryos AA, positive first beta, dropped on the second blood test. Second transfer, we got 2 positive betas, but 2 days after I got the second beta, I had some spotting, went to the doctors, and my numbers had dropped. I went back a week after, and my numbers were up. No pregnancy in the uterus. It sounded like an ectopic pregnancy, but we couldn't see it. The numbers kept going up, so I took methotrexate. Now I'm working toward transfer number 3. I have an AB embryo. I had a hysteroscopy this month with an endometrial scratch and a receptiva test, and I'm taking vitamin B6 and 12 and methylfolate plus all my vitamins, CoQ10, vitamin E, prenatals, and DHA. I do acupuncture. I eat a clean diet, no dairy. I have endometriosis, low level of endo, healthy carbs, nothing frozen, no cans, no boxes. I'm glad you're not eating boxes, by the way. I'm just kidding. It just sounds like that when I read it, so I have to say that. Now I'm scared to lose my last embryo. What else do you think I could do? The doctor is also adding Lovenox. I did heparin during my second transfer. And I forgot to mention that I'm 33 years old. My AMH in 2018 was 1.4. We retested a month and it went up to 1.6. I would love to know what you would do to address endometriosis, MTHFR, and recurrent loss since they implant but then stop. Thank you. I can't wait. Okay. So this is the thing. It sounds like you make beautiful blastocysts. You're 33 years old and you have a really healthy AMH. Do another cycle. I wouldn't go into this next transfer with the one beautiful embryo that you have, especially if you don't, or especially if you want more than one baby. So if you don't already have one baby at home, please consider doing more IVF now rather than waiting until you're, let's say, 34 or 35 to do another IVF cycle. So that's thing 1. Thing 2, with the endometriosis, it doesn't sound like you've addressed the endometriosis with a special frozen embryo transfer protocol. While you've done the receptiva test, if you know you have endo because of symptoms or something your doctor has said, perhaps go under the impression that you do have it and do treat it. So you can consider, for example, Orlissa, 1 month of Depo-Lupron, add Femera to your transfer protocol and see if that will help. In a case like yours where you have these beautiful embryos, the other thing is, how do we know that they're genetically normal or not? We just don't. So I'd also consider doing, let's say, PGTA with your next cycle. If you're not going to do it, that's okay. Maybe make sure that you and your husband maybe will find an issue, have normal chromosomes, versus not. That might be very informative for you to figure out why the embryos don't continue to grow. And lastly, consider doing an HSG if you haven't done one in the last year to make sure that you don't have a hydrosalpinx and the hydrosalpinx isn't contributing to what's going on. So that's a great question, and I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with, even my patients also. Here's another question. I'm 39 years old, currently undergoing my first round of IVF. During stimulation, I was able to produce 16 follicles, but sadly we lost 6 eggs during our first egg retrieval because I did not appropriately respond to Lupron. I'm one of the 1% to 2% that don't respond to Lupron. My doctor used an HCG trigger for the second retrieval and was able to collect 10 eggs, 8 fertilized, 5 made it to day 3, and 3 made it to the blastocyst stage. Their grades are 5AA, 5AB, 5BB, and we're still waiting on the genetic testing results. Here are my questions. If we're fortunate enough to have a chromosomally healthy embryo, what are your tips for transfer? Early in the process, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and although my TPO antibody test came back normal, my endocrinologist highly suspects that I have Hashimoto's. I'm being treated with levothyroxine, and now my thyroid levels are normal for pregnancy. Okay, so this is the thing. Because of your age, you guys know what I'm going to say. Consider doing another cycle before you transfer. You won't regret it, especially because what's going on in the world, I want every single one of you guys to be parents out there, because you're fighting so hard despite all the stuff that we're dealing with right now. You're showing up, you're watching the show, you're going into the fertility clinic, you're gonna be great parents. So please really consider doing another cycle so that you have more embryos, so that you can have a baby in 2 years and then have another baby in 2 years. And yes, you can do it. You can. If your husband has no issues and he's super strong, that was the last guy. The last husband said he had no, or the wife said the husband had no issues. You know what I mean? Long story short, I want you to be parents, and I want you to be a parent to more than one baby if that's something that you want to do. So having more embryos can't hurt. And doing it now when you're 39, since you made such beautiful embryos, it's a great time to do it. So to answer your question though, about doing or preparing for embryo transfer. So you guys all know my recipe for success, the Egg Whisper Diet, D-I-E-T. And I know I didn't have to spell diet right there or right now because everyone knows how to spell the word diet. But the D stands for diagnosis, and we know your diagnosis is probably related to being 39, nothing more, because you made these beautiful blasts. I, do IVF, which you did. E, embryo transfer preparation or endometrial implantation testing, right? So looking at the endometrium, the uterus, doing extra tests, looking at the cavity. Do the ERA test, and I know we talked about it. That's one of the first questions that I answered. And then transferring at a time in your life where you feel really good and you feel like it's a good time and you feel like really excited and the stress isn't like through the roof and you're up all night and you were waking up with panic attacks. Oh wait, no, that's me. I'm just kidding. That's not me. But you know what I mean? It could be me, but I wouldn't transfer if it were me. So that's why I always tell people what I would do if it were me, and find a really good time in your life to transfer. Wait till January, wait till February. There is no rush to transfer right now. Okay, next question. My question for your show, why do some embryos just stop developing? We went from 26 eggs to 12 fertilized to 1 viable embryo. I know, and I have a really snarky answer for you. It's called being human. It's the most annoying thing ever, I tell you. You know, I can get 40 eggs and have no normal embryos. I can get 3 eggs and have 3 normal embryos, and I'm just like, what the heckity heck? I just came up with that word too. I don't even think it's a word. But my point is this. IVF is like a box of chocolates. I swear to God, sometimes you're just like, why don't we have better tools and better tests to guide us as far as what we're going to get in the end? It's the most frustrating part of my job. I mean, I do my prayers and my chants every single night before I go to bed, and it's something like this. Please, God, please let me get the best eggs tomorrow. And I do it in the morning, and I do it all day long, and I hope and pray that every single pregnancy test that I run each day is positive. And sometimes they're not, and that's really devastating. But the one thing I know when I go to sleep at night is that I know that I've done the very best for my patient. And you guys know this question. I always ask myself the question, and I ask the patient too, what would we do if this treatment didn't work? Should we be doing that before we do a transfer? Okay, so along the lines of doing an IVF cycle, it's the same thing. Like, have we addressed all the things that we need to address before we do the IVF cycle? And should we do something different before we start? And if we can answer the question, say no. We move forward with all the best information. And with each visit, we talked about how the cycle was going, so that if the cycle didn't work out, we're never going to look back and be like, why did we even go through that? Like, obviously, like, this was a dud cycle, and there were signs at the beginning that it was going to be a dud cycle. So for those of you out there who don't know what questions to ask as you're going through IVF, it's so important to ask. What medications am I taking? Why am I taking them? Go through that IVF pyramid. You can go to my blog and put in IVF. What is IVF? That's a good article to read for you guys. And then I also have a class on Monday, my eggwhisperschool.com, my IVF class. My next live one is 4 p.m. So join that. I'm way funnier, and I wish I could drink tequila during the class, but someone got me this really cute mug, Dr. Aimee the Egg Whisperer, this week. And she even got the nose right. It's a really big, nice, long nose, right? It's kind of to scale almost. But my point is that sometimes these cycles don't work for me too, even though I do all these things. But when they don't, my patients can say that I truly felt like I knew what was going on the whole time, and I understood why I was taking what I was taking and what the expectations were along the way. Okay, next question. Does weight truly negatively impact your fertility? I have excess weight, and I'm also very aware of intentional weight bias within the medical world. I feel very conflicted and fear I will have trouble conceiving. It's been 6 months of trying. Okay, so this is the thing. Get your levels checked, and your fertility is not skin deep. It's really just as simple as that. I mean, I know it's not as simple as that, but it's kind of as simple as that. So I feel like it's important to just lay that kind of stuff out there about your weight and make sure that you're with a doctor that's like, seriously, that's what you were worried about? Come on in, just get your butt in here. We can deal with that. And for me, it's not about a number, about a weight. It's also about all the metabolic parameters, like your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your blood sugar, and then what can I do to make those levels as healthy as possible before we get pregnant. It's not about let's lose weight, and if you don't do that, then I'm not going to take care of you. And believe me, I've heard that stuff before, and that's not what we do around here. And there's so many other fertility doctors just like me, and I can help you find one just like me near you. So just message me and I'll give you some names. That's the fun part about doing the show, right? That I get to talk to all my friends all across the country, and it's a super small world. And so if someone reaches out to me and asks me, hey, who would you recommend, in this city? I can be like, oh, 3 of my friends here are their names, call them up. And if you want a personal introduction, I can make one. Okay, next question. Do you really have to wait a year trying before insurance will cover fertility tests? That is a great question. And the answer is no. You can get your fertility checked anytime you want. Will insurance cover it? They may or may not, but these tests tend to be pretty cost effective. For example, you can go to eggwhisper.com and for $175 have an FSH, estradiol, and AMH checked. For me, I actually do track and trend my hormone levels because I'm super curious by taking CoQ10, and I am not interested in fertility for myself, although my uterus does hurt a lot every single time a patient brings a baby in. I say things like, come into my uterus. It's hurting. But you guys can all relate to that because that's exactly what I want for you guys. But my point is this. I forgot my point. What is my point, you guys? My point is this. Holy smokes. You can get your fertility checked without asking anyone's permission nowadays. And, this is my point. When I get my fertility levels checked, I don't use my insurance. I just pay cash because it's a heck of a lot cheaper than using my insurance. People just don't know that. Hi, doc. I'm pretty healthy, but very much want a baby boy, so I'm opting for IVF. What should I do for greater chances of pregnancy during IVF for a boy? I get that question all the time, and I totally get it. You want the mutated chromosome. I'm just kidding. That sounds really mean. That was a joke. That's a joke. No. When I first started my practice in 2008, everyone wanted boys. And what's super crazy now, not crazy, but like crazy, awesome crazy, like so happy crazy, is that since probably about like 2013, everyone's coming in wanting girls. There was like this boy craze, and then now it's like the complete opposite. Everyone wants girls. So I get this question all the time about like, what should I do if I want a certain gender? And the answer is you have to wear that color every single day. And your husband has to come in wearing that color for the semen collection, and that really helps. It totally doesn't. That is completely a joke. It doesn't help at all. There's nothing you can do. You just have to pray to the boy god or the girl god. No, there really isn't nothing you can do. There's no food you can eat. There's nothing you can drink. It's really all about the sperm, and it's just luck of the draw. Each embryo has a 50-50 chance of being boy or girl, and that's all I can do. And I have my list of things that I talk to people about who are interested in IVF for gender, and I say things like this. You might not have the embryo gender that you want. Or I should say, and I say this, and it might take more than one cycle to get it, and it's not my fault. Because I've had people say, like, why didn't you get me this gender? And I'm like, huh? Like, it doesn't work like that. And then sometimes the gender that you want is, let's say, an embryo that has abnormal chromosomes too. And I've actually had patients tell me, not patients, a patient tell me, and this taught me a lot in the very beginning. So I always make sure to talk through these things. She actually said she thought that somehow the fact that it was a certain gender made that embryo have abnormal chromosomes. And I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with that. But long story short, it's super important to go through all the possible ramifications of what could happen if you go through IVF for a certain gender. And one thing people don't realize is you might end up creating embryos that you may not use in the future. And so my patients are super awesome because of course they're going to be. And I require them to donate their embryos to research or to other families. Actually, I don't. There's no such thing. I can't require anyone to do anything. But deep down in my heart, I really want them to donate them to other families, and a lot of them actually do. And it's been a really wonderful experience for me to see patients do that. And that's just the cool part of, being in people's lives and being part of their family in this way, because they remember you, they reach out, and they remember the things that you say, and when they're ready to donate embryos, they come my way. Okay, here's a great question. I'm really looking forward to answering this one. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm not sure if you'll have any advice for my husband and I. I bet I will. We have a 3.5-year-old, and last summer had a blighted ovum, and I miscarried. I've been trying since then, so I just came up on the 1-year mark with no luck. I saw a local fertility specialist, and both my husband and I came back normal. I've done 4 rounds of letrozole. The first cycle, 5 milligrams, days 5 through 9. Second cycle, 5 milligrams, 3 through 7. Third cycle was 5 milligrams, 3 through 7 with a trigger. Fourth cycle was 7.5 milligrams, days 3 through 7 with a trigger. I always ovulate on my own, so that was never an issue with letrozole either, but I never produced more than 1 follicle. I took this month off, and next month I think I'm being switched to 150 milligrams of Clomid to try to produce more than 1 follicle. Do you have any advice for the other things I should be trying? Okay, so first of all, let's go through my angel approach, okay? So anytime you've had a miscarriage, I'm not one of those people that will say, oh, it has to happen 2 more times until we'll start evaluating you to see why it's happening. We're going to start the angel workup or angel approach. So the A sounds like you need to do your AMH level. So AMH is a hormone that tells us basically how many eggs you have left. And if you're only making 1 follicle on the ovulation induction medication, it's very possible that your AMH might be low. So if your doctor is having to work harder and harder and harder to get your ovaries to stimulate, it sounds like you might have a lower egg count, and that could be the reason behind what's going on. So it sounds like there are 2 things going on. Number 1, secondary infertility, and the other thing is maybe the reason for the secondary infertility is related to the blighted ovum, and that could be related to the egg quality. So if your AMH level, for example, less than 0.6, you might have a higher chance of having a miscarriage. And those are the things that you might want to know before you even start getting pregnant, even the first time, because then you can make a decision to freeze embryos and genetically test them and have them frozen for yourself, not yourself. Well, I like yourself too, but for yourself, so that when you're ready to have a second baby at like 52, just kidding. Although my kids, I promise you, will be having kids when they're 50, because 40 will be like, who would have kids when they're so young? And here my patients are coming in at 40. They're like, I'm ready to have a baby, but I'm feeling kind of old, but that's totally going to change. And I'm going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, I totally predicted this. And I'm going to have this recording. And then I'm going to play it and be like, see, when I was 44, I predicted this. I digress. So make sure you're looking at your AMH and see where you're at. And then the other thing it sounds like might make sense is to see what's going on with your fallopian tubes. With that number of ovulation induction cycles, even though you have a 3.5-year-old, which means we know you have 1 tube that was open 4.5 years ago almost, you want to make sure that you're not missing something like tubal factor, you're not missing something like a polyp or something like that inside the cavity of your uterus that could affect implantation. So that's something important to take a look at. Okay, next question. Dr. Aimee, hope you're well. Thank you. I started following you while going through my first Ivf cycle. Your page has been so helpful. Thanks for all you do, especially the lives. I have since gotten a positive pregnancy test. I'm so excited, but very cautious as I have no idea what to expect, and I'm aware of the risks. I just want to ask, is it possible to not feel any symptoms, or am I going crazy? I'm currently 5 weeks and I only have slight nausea and cramping, and I feel tired. Okay, well, those are symptoms, my friend, my very, very pregnant friend. And that's normal stuff. I mean, you're not going to be, hugging the toilet the whole time. That's very rare that people do that. And the symptoms that you describe are exactly what's normal. Where I live, doctors don't perform beta tests, and they only wait for a scan at 6 weeks. And I want to get testing again because I don't have any symptoms. Well, that's tough. I mean, for my patients, I test them 8 days post-transfer with a positive test. Hopefully everyone's positive, but I know sometimes it doesn't happen. I test 2 days later, and then depending on the level, sometimes I'll test 2 days after that, and then a week after that, and then an ultrasound a week after that. So I'm constantly monitoring how the pregnancy is growing, because let me tell you, that makes me feel really good, knowing that everything's going well, because if it were me, the first time that I find out about my pregnancy viability, it would be, I'm not a very patient person, and waiting until like 6.5 weeks of pregnancy and beyond. And some clinics make patients wait until they're like 10 or 11 weeks. That seems just too much for me. Okay, let's see here. This is a great question. Okay, hello, Dr. Aimee. I came across your channel, your YouTube channel, and that got me to your Instagram. Currently, I'm working with a fertility doctor and preparing for the IUI process. I'm 42 years old, athletic, single, and ready to have a child. I did all the testing with the Tushy method. I'm in check. I love that. Tushy check, done. I'll be using donor sperm. Well, last month I was in the office doing an ultrasound, hoping to start Menopur. After the final blood test before starting meds were done, my doctor said that my LH and FSH levels have dramatically changed from June to August. In June, my FSH was 2.98, and in August, my FSH was 25.89. The doctor said that we can't proceed unless we get my numbers back to normal, and the medication IUI won't work with those levels that high. I was told to come in at the end of September to test. Since then, I stopped all my extra vitamins, herbs, teas, castor oil packing, even the inositol that a friend recommended. And I don't have PCOS either. What can I do to get those numbers lowered so I can proceed? I already purchased Menopur and paid for multiple vials as directed by the doctors. I'm very hopeful. Okay, listen. When it comes to these levels, they're not in our control. They're simply diagnostic tests that tell us a story. They tell us what the chances are with the treatment that we're going to be doing. They basically show you what you should be doing, how long you should be doing it before you move on to before you start considering other options. So if you're a patient of mine, that would, as far as like how I would communicate with you, I would say exactly what I just shared with you. And I would talk to you about maybe adding DHEA. So DHEA there's a micronized version that Theralogics makes. You can use the code TUSHY, all caps, TUSHY, and buy it. The micronized version may not have as many symptoms as the non-micronized version. That has been shown, and you can go to PubMed and put DHEA lowers FSH, IVF, and you'll see the studies, and that is one strategy that can lower FSH, and that might help. I imagine maybe your clinic has a requirement for FSH before they'll quote-unquote allow you to start treatment. Otherwise, just know that your FSH levels fluctuate from cycle to cycle. You can certainly get your AMH level checked to see what's going on. But at the end of the day, there's so many awesome clinics out there around you. Talk to your doctor really openly and honestly and just say, look, given my age, can we just move forward? I just want a chance. I get it. It's all about quality, not quantity. And I'm at the point in my life since I'm over 40 that I don't think I'm going to have that many chances left. And I would just like to move forward with my eyes wide open. So even if, let's say, they tell you that there's a less than 5% chance this is going to work, still, it might be helpful emotionally and psychologically to at least go through the motions to see if it could work. And if it doesn't, just know there's so many different ways of being a mom. But certainly, it sounds like this is the perfect opportunity and perfect time for you to move forward with treatment now. Okay, here is another question coming up. I answered that one. Okay, this is a good one. Dr. Aimee, I'm finding that the physical aspects of IVF, like taking shots and being poked and prodded, are much more manageable than the emotional toll that this process is taking on me. My doctors told me that my stress could interfere with implantation. I'm in therapy, practicing meditation. Can you speak about how stress can affect implantation and coping strategies for the 2-week wait? So yeah, you guys have heard me say this over and over, that your mental health is the most important thing to me as being a fertility patient. So I try to introduce my patients to online groups like Resolve. There's Fertility Rally, to one-on-one therapists and psychiatrists like Dr. Linda Kim from Love Luke. I've had her on the show. I've had Dr. Nicole Kangas on the show, Dr. Coleman Allen on the show. So many different therapists out there that can provide support both one-on-one and in a group environment. And I think it's so important to be connected with other people and to find people that are going to be part of your fertility posse, part of your tribe. People who are going to be rooting you on, not questioning why you're doing, like, oh my God, don't you know there's a pandemic? Like, why would you even think of having a baby right now? Like, those people you just unfriend. You just be like, click, block, done. You want to surround yourself by people who will understand what you're going through and why you're doing it, and will be rooting for you. And I would say that as far as stress, finding more resources, more coping skills, there's always something you can learn from a therapist, and then find another therapist and find a group, and then just constantly equip yourself with the skill set that you need until you feel like you're ready to move forward with your transfer and your cycle. But there's no rush. Waiting a month, 2 months, taking an emotional break sometimes can help. Those are the kinds of things that I talk to my patients about, and certainly acupuncture too, if you haven't started that already. Here's another great question. Our story is long despite receiving almost no treatment. This question might be, let's see here. Sorry guys. This is a long question, and I'll just paraphrase it. It's a very sweet woman that reaches out. She's 46 years old. Both lost previous partners and finally found each other, and they still want a family. Neither have children. They're both the last of our family line, and it sounds like they've been going to a lot of doctors who've said to them, you probably won't get pregnant anyway, so why do it? In a year's time, the two clinics did one IUI for them, and that's it. So they're feeling lost. Fiance's sperm has low motility, but all else normal. His motility improved on supplements. His BMI is better now, down from 34 to 30. He has not had the DNA fragmentation test, and no one mentioned it to them. FSH is fluctuating between 15 and 23. She's taking all sorts of supplements, doing acupuncture. They've been doing IUI at home with a midwife because she's been so supportive and treats them like they're humans. So she's asking for my recommendations, and she's saying that I'm not allowed to use the word egg donor. And also opening up the possibility for it by saying, if we can one day accept that we will have to resort to donor egg, do you think it would be okay for me to carry a pregnancy? Okay, so this is the thing. I have all the compassion in the world for you. Just because your eggs may have run out of what you need to be a mother with your own eggs does not mean, obviously, that our desire to be a mother also stops or runs out. It's so incredibly unfair, and that men, they can't relate to us. And I'm not saying that your partner can't relate, because it doesn't sound like that at all. But we as women have to accept that we will become infertile 100% of the time at some point in our life. And for a lot of women, it's at a point where we've run out of eggs. And that's really, really hard. And that's why I try through all the stuff that I do, all the education that I do, to teach women about fertility, aging, and whether you're 46 or 26 and this is happening to you, I still have the same drive to help you be a mom, and still the same drive with your own eggs. It's just hard. The likelihood at 46 is probably 1% or less. And have I had a 46-year-old get pregnant with her own eggs? I have had one in the last 13 plus years. There was one that did. Could you be the next one? I absolutely want you to be, and I don't think there's anything wrong with you doing the things that you're doing. Eventually you'll stop ovulating altogether, but until then, if you want to keep trying with your own eggs and doing the things that you're doing, I think that's okay. But I also want you to remember, I want you to spend your youth as a parent and not a patient. And there's so many incredible ways of being a mom. It doesn't have to be with egg donation. It could be with adoption. It could be with embryo donation. And my patients who get to that point, it might take a month, it might take 3 years, it might take 5 years, and they never look back and say, I regret it. The one thing they share with me is, I wish I had done it sooner. I had all these fears about egg donation, and I think that surrounding yourself with other women just like you who are in a similar situation, who have the same fears and concerns and doubts, I think would sometimes help you to meet other women. And I sometimes put my patients in contact with one another, and they talk, and they're like, really good friends now. And having those relationships with other 46-year-olds that can relate to what you're going through can also be really, really helpful. From a fertility standpoint, I think you're doing all the right things. If you were my patient, if you still had between 1 to 3 follicles, I might consider giving you a fertility pill to help you ovulate maybe 2 eggs to see if that could somehow help. And then I would say, you know what, like every 3 months, let's reevaluate. And if your FSH level starts to go in the 20s and above and stay there, it might make sense that we stop, or you just consider home inseminations, just like you're doing, and then reevaluate things in like 3 months and then see what you want to do next. And just know that you don't need to have ovaries to have a pregnancy. You don't need to ovulate regularly because we use hormones to get the uterus ready for a transfer. So I hear you and I feel for you, and I want you to be a mom, and I hope it's with your own eggs. But the reality is that the likelihood is so low that it makes sense to just talk out loud about all the different possibilities and maybe talk to a therapist. And if you haven't looked at Jana Rupnow, Rupnow, she's a great resource for people like us that, you know, you just reached out to me, and she has written a great book, 3 Makes a Baby, and a lot of my patients read it and they're like, oh wow, I feel so much more comfortable now with this idea of using an egg donor. Okay, next question. Let's see here. I think I might have skipped a page. Let's see here. Pardon me, guys. Okay. Hi, doctor. I have a question. Me and my partner have 3 boys already, and we decided after that to get my fallopian tubes removed permanently, meaning I can't get them back or even reconnected because they're gone. Now my husband's having second thoughts about having 1 more baby, and I was wondering, even though we can't naturally conceive anymore, can I look into doing IVF? And the answer is yes. If you've had your tubes removed, IVF is exactly what you do to get pregnant. You know, that's what IVF was invented for. Here's another question. Dr. Aimee, I've been listening to your show on YouTube for a year. Thank you so much for your dedication. You give out a lot of great information. I felt closer to you more than my own doctor. That's very sweet. We had 4 rounds of IVF and got 2 normal embryos with PGD testing. We did the transfer and it failed. And I'm really sorry that that happened. What do you think about this embryo? The embryologist said it looked great. It was a grade AA. Before transfer, the lining was 8 millimeters. I had surgery to remove a damaged fallopian tube and then a polyp, and the doctor confirmed that everything is clear. I don't know why it didn't work. Any recommendations for me? So that's really hard. I mean, I do transfer really high quality embryos sometimes that don't work also. And what I do is make sure that we've talked through all the possible things that we should do to prepare for a transfer before we transfer, because if it doesn't work, the last thing you want to do is say, why didn't you do this for me? Like, why didn't you do that for me? So one of the things that I do for patients is implantation testing, like the ERA test and also the Receptiva test. And I think about the fact that maybe there could be silent endometriosis and designing a protocol that could address that. And thinking about all those things before transferring, just kind of going back to the basics of the egg whisperer diet and asking, why are we even here in the first place? And what are we able to do that's in our control? And the other thing is looking at the sperm quality on the day of the egg retrieval can sometimes help, and for me at least, and consider doing the sperm DNA fragmentation test. So you guys all probably now know, you're all experts in embryo diamonds. Embryo diamonds, that's a mnemonic that I use for you guys to know exactly everything you need to know about your embryos before you transfer. So the E is, the E, you guys know how to spell embryo. The D is the day your embryo is frozen. That has a lot to do with the I, which is the implantation rate. Finding out if it's aneuploid, mosaic, getting the official reports. It's just wild to me that I have patients reaching out from all over the world still in 2020, and I say, what is the embryo quality? Do you have your reports? What is the genetic abnormality in your embryos? And they're like, well, we never got anything. We didn't know we could ask for that. Well, now you guys know. The word is out. You can know. The N is which one's normal. The D, will they help you reach your dreams? And the S is the sperm on the day of the retrieval. So those are all the things that I want you guys to know about your embryos. So for this patient, that's what I would do too, is find this stuff out and do implantation testing and then go for it and do another cycle. I hope it works. Okay, here's another question. I'm 42. I did 4 rounds of IVF, got 2 embryos grade 1 AA, and they passed the chromosome testing. Oh, actually, that was part of that last question. My apologies. Okay, so here we go. Let me get to this. Please hold. There should be hold music here, you guys. Do you guys hear the hold music? This is what happens when you see a full day of patients. You start at 6:30 in the morning. So now I'm feeling bad that I might be missing some questions. This is a good one here. Let's see. Okay, let's see here. Both myself and my husband are 30 years old, never been pregnant. My AMH is 2.75 with all signs indicating that I ovulate regularly with no abnormal tests for me. We've been trying to conceive for more than a year. We've been diagnosed with male factor infertility with total motile counts ranging from 14 million to 2 million, but mostly between 2 to 3 million. After this diagnosis, he started taking Fertility, CoQ10, and L-carnitine based on recommendations from his urologist. He has a normal testosterone, FSH, LH, and estradiol levels. He doesn't have an obstruction. He doesn't smoke or use cannabis. He's generally healthy with no significant past medical history. He sleeps well, is not stressed, rarely drinks alcohol. He started wearing boxers over briefs and avoids heat. It sounds like you know my balls method. You just basically rattled off my balls method. Great job. We've done 2 IUIs with post-wash total motile counts of 0.3 million and 0.5 million. At this point, our REI recommends IVF with ICSI, which we'll be pursuing at the end of September. My question is this: do you know of anything else that my husband can do to increase his sperm count with no obvious signs of a reason for this low count? Additionally, we only know that my husband's count is low. We don't know about the morphology as it's never been resulted in the semen analysis, and I've not had DNA fragmentation or anti-sperm antibodies checked. Okay, this is what I would do. I would consider doing sperm DNA fragmentation testing, obviously, because you want to find that out before you start a cycle. I bet the DNA frag could be pretty normal because it sounds like he's super fit, he's taking good care of himself, he's not doing, drugs or alcohol, and his BMI is healthy. But I would consider more genetic testing. Do a Y chromosome microdeletion test. Do a chromosome analysis. And then make sure you're not missing anything big picture, and then talk to someone about 2 things. Number 1, have him start Clomid, Arimidex, or HCG shots. That stuff can work for a lot of guys. So rather than just saying the testosterone's normal, sometimes it's normal for an 85-year-old guy. I've seen that. I see that all the time. They're like, oh yeah, it's normal. It's basically in the normal range, but like if you're 90. So make sure that the testosterone is truly normal for his age group, and if not, he could benefit, even if his testosterone is normal, from Clomid. Just Google Clomid, low sperm, and male infertility, or something along those lines, and you'll see that I'm not making this stuff up. Because when I tell a guy to take Clomid, he's like, oh, do you know what it did to my wife? And I'm like, yeah, I do. It's not going to do the same thing to you. And the wife will call me and be like, all he wants to do is have sex now that he's on Clomid. And it's because it raises your testosterone. Duh. So I sound like a sexologist today. Is there such a thing as a sexologist? I don't even know. Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay, good evening. I have a question about AMH. Last year, my AMH was 1.69. I have a large endometrioma on my left ovary. I began taking supplements like NAC and Ubiquinol, and I retested a year later, and now it's 3.24. Is it normal to have that much of an increase? And the answer is yes. AMH stands for always meandering hormone. It just kind of does this a little bit and does that a little bit. And what I tell people is if you've seen that type of an increase, get it checked again. Get a follicle count. Look and see what's going on, and have your doctor put the pieces together and tell you what's really going on with your fertility, and then have them talk to you about what it's going to take for you to have a baby, given the fact that you have an endometrioma, which is a fertility-threatening condition. It can block your fallopian tubes and cause egg quality issues. So depending on what you're comfortable with, you may want to take an opportunity to freeze some eggs or embryos or both. Okay. Next question here. Going on to the next page. Oh, this is a good question. Is Brazilian waxing safe for women post-frozen embryo transfer? And my answer is this. Who is getting Brazilian waxed right now? There's a pandemic. I can't find anyone to do a Brazilian wax. No, but in all seriousness, who? Tell me where. I don't like when pregnant women are in pain, and waxing can sometimes cause pain. So I tell my patients, if it's before you're pregnant, yes, you can get waxed. After pregnancy though, if it hurts you, please don't do it. And I don't know about going into anywhere like that to get waxed right now because of COVID. I would say, maybe Google how to do your own, or teach your husband how to wax you. That would probably be a really fun experience that you guys will just laugh your butts off about like 20 years later, or maybe every single day for the next 20 years. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so I'm thinking that now that I switched my Ask the Egg Whisperer to go to asktheeggwhisperer.com, I'm going to be so much better at not missing your guys' questions. So, okay, now I'm going to go to the questions that you guys asked me through asktheeggwhisperer.com. Caroline is saying, the Lotus Nail Place by Hyatt House. Backdoor bring cash. I love that. Okay. So this is from Soleil. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 35 years old who just got my IUD out a couple weeks ago. When I was 25, I had a 21 centimeter, holy smokes, 21 centimeter granulosa cell tumor and emergency surgery. I now have one ovary. It was malignant, but completely encapsulated, so no more cancer now that it was removed. Awesome. I've had an ultrasound and it appears that things are normal. I'm waiting for some more results. I'm currently taking prenatals, CoQ10, and omegas. Do you have any suggestions to what I could do to help myself get pregnant? Thank you so much. Okay, Soleil, this is the thing. That kind of tumor and surgery, what does that do? Risk factor 4, blocked fallopian tubes. Well, tube. You probably don't have the tube on that one side. So, number 1, consider doing an HSG, right? T for tushy, get your tushy checked. You get your uterus checked. I'm not so worried about your uterus. However, because of the surgery that you had, you might have some scar tissue, and the ovary that you have remaining just might be a little bit not misplaced, but displaced. And there might be some tube or egg pickup issues from the tube that you do have. So that's really helpful to know. Sperm, make sure you've done a sperm check. Meetfellow.com/egg whisperer. That's a great do-it-yourself test that you can do. And then the other thing that I would do is hormones. Get your AMH level checked. Let's see what's going on with your hormones, right? So we know that you have one ovary, so that means half the eggs that you were born with are remaining. And that also means that you'll go into menopause sooner, right? This is not rocket science. You probably knew that deep down, but it's important for you to know that. So at 35, if you were my sister, you wouldn't get a choice. I'd be at your house every day with a needle, giving you a shot, picking you up, driving you to the egg retrieval, and doing an egg retrieval on you and making some really beautiful embryos for you to have. And certainly you can still try and get pregnant naturally at home, but that's what I would suggest. You're doing all the right things. Do some more tests so that you don't find out a year from now that your tube was blocked, and you'll get really annoyed if you did. But it sounds like since you're watching the show, you know what questions to ask. Here's another question from Kate. Hi, Dr. Aimee, and thank you for your amazing show. I'm currently in our 3rd IVF cycle. I have diminished ovarian reserve. My AMH is 0.4 with current microdose Lupron protocol. I have one follicle on my right ovary at 14 millimeters on day 4, no other measurable follicles. If I were your patient, would you recommend converting the cycle to IUI or continuing to a retrieval with only one follicle? Okay, Kate, it just depends on your age. Based on your age, I would make that decision. If you were 45, let's say, and there was one follicle, I would be like, dude, let's go for it. But if I would say that if at the beginning of the cycle you had more follicles and I put you on birth control pills for your protocol, and you guys all know I don't like birth control pills for women who have a low AMH, I would say maybe stop everything, definitely try getting pregnant naturally and with IUI, and then regroup, reassess, and try again. See if you should start the cycle a little bit differently. Talk to your doctor about priming with HGH, for example, and talk about a different protocol. I like to use a hybrid protocol, a combination of 2 things, fertility pills and shots. And I also use HGH during the cycle. And in some patients, it can help. It doesn't help everybody, but you should go into it knowing that there is still a chance for you to get more eggs with your AMH of 0.4 and repeat your AMH. Let's see what it is, because that 0.4, it might be that it's really 0.1 and the 0.4 was just elevated because of a lab variation. So that's really important to know. Here's a question from Robin. Hi, Robin. I'm 28 and my partner's 31. We've been diagnosed with unexplained. I roll, please, everybody. You guys know how I feel about unexplained. There's no such thing as unexplained. All our tests came back great, except, so you can't use unexplained. I have a cyst on my right ovary that my doctor said could be an endometrioma. We've done 3 IUIs with no success. Is it time to move on to IVF, or is there anything else we can do? Okay, Robin. Endometriosis can affect egg quality, can also block fallopian tubes. So tushy check, please. Get your tubes checked. That's number 1. Let's see what's going on there. Number 2, it sounds like maybe getting your AMH level checked would be really helpful too, to see how many eggs you have, to have a better understanding as to how many mature eggs you can get from an IVF cycle. You are so lucky that you have this information at 28. So lucky. So lucky. For all my 40-year-olds that are out there, you were all saying, I wish I was that smart at 28 to have the opportunity to know that I had endometriosis, especially those who've been diagnosed with endometriosis in your 40s. So that's pretty great. And then you want to consider supplements like NAC, N-acetylcysteine, CoQ10 for sure, and then talk to your doctor about preserving your fertility now at 30 or 28. You're not even 32. I don't even know why I'm thinking that. At 28, get your embryos frozen, get eggs frozen too. If your mom doesn't like your boyfriend, get eggs frozen. Because mom is always right, everybody? Okay. I would say that it's not necessarily time to move on to IVF, but let's just figure out more about your diagnosis because it seems like there is an explanation. Okay. So this is a question from Bally, 36 years old, initial AMH 0.01, repeat 0.04. We were told all other labs are normal, no male factor identified. Per the doctor, because of the AMH, it's advisable to do ICSI to maximize success. First IVF late July with max dose meds. 1 immature egg that was ICSI'd and didn't fertilize. Back-to-back IVF for a second cycle. 3 eggs, 1 mature, 2 slightly immature. 1 fertilized normally, got a day 7 blast. What are the chances of resulting in a pregnancy after implantation? That's really hard. Day 7 embryos have a much lower chance of implantation, but every lab is different. I think that it's really important to ask the doctor who did the IVF for you and be like, what's up with my diamonds, right? My embryo diamond. And for you, it's this 1 embryo diamond. What is the likelihood that it's normal given my age and given everything you know about me and how the embryo looks, right? So what's the quality? And I would say a day 7 embryo probably has a pretty low chance of success, even if it has normal chromosomes. So at 36, you might want to consider trying again, maybe doing IUI, getting pregnant naturally. And I know that sounds like not something that we can control, but it's still something that you can try because you're so young. And yes, I did just call you young at 36. But that would be my suggestion, is to try AMH, do DHEA if your doctor agrees. Consider another protocol, avoid birth control pills, and try again and see if you can get another embryo before you transfer this day 7 one. And then consider other options if you need to. And it's okay if you need to. It's okay. Like, you're allowed to. You're allowed to talk out loud about what you would do if this next cycle doesn't work. And that's what I would do. Okay, next question. Rebecca, I've had 2 IVF cycles. Both times almost all my embryos were frozen on day 6. In total, I had 3 on day 5 and 9 on day 6. Is this a sign of an embryo quality issue? Here's my diagnosis: severe male factor infertility, Tushy method. I love that people are sending me Tushy method, all normal. I'm 35, husband is 42, both very healthy diet and lifestyle, 3 failed transfers, currently PUPO, for those of you who don't know what that means. That's pregnant until proven otherwise, with a 4th transfer, fresh transfer, waiting on PGTA for 8 embryos. Next up, ERA receptiva, no endometriosis symptoms. Thanks, Dr. Aimee. Okay, so no. If you have your embryos frozen on day 6, I would say that no, it is not an embryo quality issue. Every embryo will grow at its own rate and speed, and you don't want the embryologist to just freeze an embryo unless it's fully popped. So I brought this up before. An embryo is kind of like popcorn, right? So you have the popcorn on the kernel, and you want to be able to biopsy and freeze that at the safest time possible. And if you're not doing it at the safest time, then what that means is this: you could be damaging an embryo. So you want them to do it when the embryo is ready. And so ask your doctor what the pregnancy rate differences are between day 5 and day 6. And in a lot of labs, there's little to no difference, but your doctor can truly answer that. And I think when it comes to embryo quality, that can tell you if there's an egg quality issue as far as the beauty of your embryo, and certainly also knowing about the chromosomes would certainly help too. So I hope that the PGTA for your 8 embryos comes back fabulous. I truly hope that for you. Okay. Here's a great question from Emerson. Quick question. My question is, can I go for Mini Ivf with an AMH level of 0.590? My answer is yes, you can. And that's exactly the approach that I would use. An AMH of around 0.6 tells us that we might be able to get around 4 to 6 eggs or so. And doing Mini Ivf would be a great approach for that. Here's another question from Sarah. I have endometriosis since 2009. I've been actively trying the last 3 years with no children. I'm nearly 32 years old. My AMH is 4.2, FSH 11, total follicle counts 14. All the rest of my blood tests are good. My husband's semen analysis came out very good. I was wondering, what is the rate of success if I do IVF? Okay, so rate at 32 with an AMH of 4, your chance of success is truly very high, probably over 65% in your first cycle. However, since you might have endometriosis, you want to definitely address that and see if you have adenomyosis and consider Depo-Lupron before your transfer. Remember the Egg Whisperer diet? Consider doing endometrial testing before your transfer, and you can do a test like Receptiva, or you can just go right into doing 1 or 2 months of Depo-Lupron, depending on how severe your endometriosis is. And the decision I make as far as how to prepare for the transfer often is based on how many embryos I have at the very beginning. So with that number of embryos, I then make a decision as to whether we should do extra testing, what would we do, or should we just go ahead and move forward with the transfer, and then ask your doctor what's the best transfer protocol for you, knowing that you have endometriosis, because some people have terrible endometriosis and putting them on estrogen is terrible for their endometriosis. But other people, it's pretty mild or just in the ovary and not in the uterus, and they'll do fine on a medicated cycle. And in my patients with endo, I do use estrogen at times, but I also use Femara or Letrozole every single day until they start progesterone. That seems to really help with endometriosis. Here's a great question from Priscilla. I'm 37 years old with low AMH and an FSH of 10. I'm also dealing with endometriosis and there's some adenomyosis. My doctor was transparent and said we have no time but to take action now. I like that. We have no time. I'm worried of the quality of my eggs and the lack of. Have you seen cases similar to mine that have been successful? He also mentioned a fresh transfer. If we only have one and may not be able to do extra genetic testing on chromosomes, is that safe? Should I worry about an unhealthy transfer with later health issues with my baby? I totally get it. You're 37 and you have low AMH and an FSH of 10. You don't have to make any decisions right now, honestly. You can let your embryos guide you. So with your embryos, when you make one, what I would say is give yourself all possible options. After the retrieval, start hormones. Because if you didn't and you wanted to transfer in the end, then you can't if you didn't restart your estrogen and progesterone after the egg retrieval. So that's what I do in cases like this. I like to keep options open, and then we're talking about the quality. We're talking about how it's looking. Because if it's like, not so good embryo, you might want to just transfer. If it's fabulous, you might want to biopsy and freeze it and do another cycle and get another one so you have another chance for another pregnancy. So those are the kinds of things that I talk about with my patients. And then we make a decision, for example, 5 days after retrieval, whether we should transfer the embryo or not. Sometimes I even meet patients in the transfer room and then we talk there, and then I'm like, let's just go home. This embryo is looking really awesome. Let's biopsy and freeze it. Or I'll be like, this embryo is not looking so good. It doesn't make sense for you to transfer it. Let's give it another day. And if it continues to expand and has an epic turnaround, then we'll go ahead and freeze it. Otherwise, I'm not going to put you through a transfer that gives you such a low chance. So those are the kinds of things that would be helpful to talk about with your doctor. Here's a great question from Cher. I was diagnosed with PCOS 3 years ago. However, I've been getting regular periods for the past 2 years now. I tried for the past months for a baby and nothing. I check when I ovulate to ensure that I have sex on those days. I'm good according to my doctor, but I'm still waiting on the sperm for my partner. If his results come back low, what options are available for us? Well, that's a beautiful thing. That's what ICSI is for, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. You take a little sperm and you put it into the egg. So if the sperm count's really low, no big deal. We can take care of you like that. However, you always want to find out, why is the sperm low? Why? Right? So I have people that tell me, everything was checked. They just say it was low and that's how he was born. And I'm like, balls method, right? Yeah. Background genetics, DNA fragmentation, chromosome analysis, Y chromosome microdeletion, check for America seal. Has the testosterone level been checked? Are you a candidate for Clomid? Are you addressing all the lifestyle stuff, not smoking weed, smoking, cooking your balls, all that kind of stuff, right? And then they're like, oh, no. Wow, I'm so glad I met you. I really hope everyone's glad that they met me. I mean, at the end of the day, these are the things that I talk to all my patients about. And still sometimes, we choose not to do certain things, but it's so important and helpful to at least talk through them and talk about them. This is a great question from Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sending in your question. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I love your show. I love you too, Elizabeth. One question I had is that I had bleeding, not heavy bleeding, but not light spotting either at 6 weeks. Later on, I have a piece of hair here. Later on in my pregnancy, the ultrasound showed that I had a bilobed placenta. Is it possible that I had twins but lost one? I don't think it's possible that you had twins and lost one. I mean, at 6 weeks of pregnancy, if you were a patient of mine, I would look at your ovaries and see how many eggs you ovulated, and then I could typically tell if it was more than one and say if there was a chance of twins. And then we can check your HCG levels in the beginning, and if your HCG level, for example, super early on was very high and was more than doubling, that could be a sign of twins, but I don't necessarily think that, but I'm just happy that you're pregnant. Okay, next question from Bally. Low AMH 0.04, 36 years old, debating if I should go do back-to-back cycles. With the first cycle, I was on birth control pills to induce a period and had only one follicle. I naturally got period after the first cycle and immediately jumped into the second cycle with 3 follicles at baseline. Is it better to do back-to-back cycles? I'm focusing on supplements and losing weight. I'm 5'6" with a BMI over 30, and I was thinking of taking a break. Okay, so this is my thing. If you're thinking of taking a break, take a break. Nothing bad's going to happen. I promise you. I know your AMH is 0.04, but taking 1 month off is not the end of the world. It really isn't. Whatever is happening to you did not happen overnight. It happened slowly over time. So if you need to take a little break, it's okay. In a case like yours, you might be a good candidate for something called luteal phase stimulation, meaning you're just doing, or duo stim. So if you guys haven't read about it, it's something that you can consider for people who are still able to respond to medication. So it really depends on what your FSH level is also. So if your FSH levels are super high and your ovaries just aren't responding as well to medications anymore because the egg count is low, then maybe this is not an option for you. But if you were my patient, I'd be like, so what are you doing tomorrow? And what are you doing the next day? And how about after that? And what about next week? Because for me, it's like anytime I have a patient who has an AMH that's 0.04, I'm like, I want your eggs. And I don't want to miss an egg, and every single egg counts. And if it's that important to you, it's going to be that important to me as well. So those are the kinds of things that I think about. And of course, you guys know me well. Take your CoQ10, take your NAD, take your supplements. Consider DHEA, for example, if your FSH level is high, and see if that will help. Just kidding. Okay. Here's a question from Milena. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 35 years old. I'm freezing my eggs. I have DOR, AMH of 0.5. Everything else is in range. FSH of 6, estradiol 35. Round 1, 6 eggs, 1 mature. I'm sorry. Round 2, 13 eggs, 9 mature. Yes, great job. I'm thinking of doing round 3 back-to-back. Is back-to-back a good idea, or shall I wait a month? We froze the immature eggs too. Do they really have a chance? Okay, I don't think immature eggs have a chance, but maybe in like 20 to 30 years, we might find some technology, or maybe even sooner, like 5 years. I really, really hope that we do. For those of you who don't know what an immature egg is, when we retrieve an egg, it has to be mature. And if it's immature, some clinics still freeze them, but there's no technology really that's reliable that works, that can culture an egg and make it so that it's going to turn into a healthy embryo. And I wish that we did, because I can tell you, we waste so many eggs in this country because so many of our eggs at retrieval aren't mature when we really hope and pray that they were. So the question about back-to-back cycles, I would tell you that in someone who has an AMH of 0.5, you just keep showing up. You just never know when you're going to have a better cycle. So period starts, think of me, follow me to my clinic. I do have that bumper sticker on my car. If your period is here, follow me. I'm not kidding. I'm not. So my point is that, you go through a cycle, your period starts about 10 days later, so you show up again. What's your FSH estradiol? What's your follicle count? If it's amazing, if it's awesome, you go for it. You don't want to miss out on an opportunity to do another cycle, and you stay on your supplements. If you were my patient, that's what I would tell you to do. So talk to your doctor about that too. The point of the show is not to go against your doctor. The point of the show is to have you learn stuff that you could do and maybe talk to your doctor about it. But at the end of the day, your doctor knows what's best, not me. I don't know what's best. I'm sitting here in San Francisco with a freaking zombie apocalypse happening right now. I'm lucky to be alive, you guys. I'm fighting and killing zombies all day long around here. Next question from Lena. What is the timeline of frozen embryo transfer in a non-natural cycle? I'm starting meds on the first day of my period, but I'm unsure of the road ahead. What is the difference between a natural versus unnatural? I have a day 5 blastocyst. Love from Norway. Well, thank you for listening from Norway. I mean, that's really awesome. Now I have a friend in Norway. That's cool. I probably have another friend that I didn't remember that I had, and I don't think I do. Now I do. So thank you from Norway for your question. So let's go through it like this. Medicated cycle, 3 weeks of hormones, 2 weeks of estrogen, third week, estrogen overlapping with progesterone until you transfer. The rules are this: you start progesterone when your lining is thick enough. Some people need maybe 4 weeks of meds before they get to transfer. Some people need, even longer. It just really depends on your lining thickness, and progesterone starts the clock. That's it. So I have patients that they start their progesterone, not my patients, but I've heard these things before where they say things like, oh, I want to move my transfer day. And I'm like, oh, you can't. You started the progesterone. You don't get an option. That's your transfer day. And then I have other patients that are like, wait, but with my first baby, I was on 16 tablets of estrogen, and now 16 days, and now you have me on 17 days. I'm just so worried that this difference will mean that my pregnancy rate will be different. And I say, no, don't worry. It's just the progesterone that matters. As long as your lining is around 9 to, like my cutoff is, I'm kind of picky about linings. If you couldn't tell, I'm kind of picky about stuff. But my lining thickness that I prefer is around 9 millimeters or thicker. And so for me, I will make sure that I have enough of a lining before I start progesterone. I just kind of got confused and lost there, but you guys can tell how important progesterone is to me. Okay, and your lining and all that kind of stuff. And then the difference between a medicated and an unmedicated cycle. So in an unmedicated cycle, we're relying on your own natural ovulation to produce the progesterone. You have to be monitored a whole lot more in an unmedicated or natural cycle than a medicated, because we have to track your ovulation, see when your follicle rupture is, maybe trigger you if I still use a trigger shot with that, and I still monitor with the hormone levels, and I'm just kind of a control, not a freak. I've been called a freak before, maybe a fertility freak, but there's a lot of involvement with me if we do a natural cycle transfer for many, many reasons. So there's not that much of a difference, except in a natural cycle, there's more monitoring, less control. You don't know when your transfer is going to fall. You don't have a calendar as much that can tell you exactly when it's going to be. Here's a question from Ashley. I'm almost 35 years old, PCOS and male factor, and have 7 failed IUIs between 2015 and 17. I had 1 failed IVF egg retrieval in April 2019 with no explanation as to why he couldn't get any eggs, and a successful egg retrieval in 2019 with 5 eggs, and ended up with only 2 that made it far enough to transfer. I transferred both at the doc's recommendation, but it failed. We're considering doing another round, but are not sure if we'll end up with the same results with no eggs than only a few. Do you have any reasons why the egg retrieval would have failed? The HCG was in my blood and the follicle fluid, and what are the chances it happens again? Also, what can we do to increase our chances? I also have 1 ovary that is attached to my uterine wall, likely from ovarian drilling from 2013. Is it worth having a surgery to detach it and allow us to get the other ovary for potential eggs? Is there a good time frame to do that? Okay, so this is the thing. What is your AMH? You're 35 years old with PCOS. Do you truly have PCOS? Why only 5 eggs? You have to ask yourself that question. PCOS to me stands for please confirm this ovary syndrome. Is that still the right diagnosis for you? And if your BMI is, let's say, over 30, for example, could that be a reason why there might be less eggs retrieved than expected? Are they not giving you enough of a trigger shot? Maybe you need more because of your body size. Are they so scared about OHSS that they're not giving you enough hormones? So those are the questions that I would want someone to go through with me if I were the patient. And then I would say, if there's male factor, go through Ball's method, do all the things that I always say on my show as far as checking the DNA fragmentation. Is there a varicocele? Fixing that if needed. Having him see a urologist, obviously, that's who does most of this stuff for me. And as far as increasing your chances, it sounds like maybe not just the ovarian drilling caused issues, but you might have endometriosis. So talk to your doctor about the possibility of that and see if they haven't checked your fallopian tubes to do that. Because if your ovary is stuck to the uterus, guess what? Your fallopian tubes might be filled with fluid as well. So if your ovary is doing that from the surgery, you want to make sure that you're not transferring embryos when there's a hydro water salpinx tube. So you don't want to put embryos inside a uterus if there's fluid in the tubes, because that could cause a negative pregnancy test. That was from Ashley. Thank you, Ashley, for that question. Okay, last question. I'm going to get to your live chatted questions here. This is from Elizabeth. Hi, Amy. Love your show. I've had 3 natural miscarriages all within the course of a year. I am sorry, Elizabeth. I moved to IVF to find out that I have low AMH, 0.29 to 0.5, FSH of 12, follicle count 9 to 10, so DOR at age 28. I did 2 IVF cycles at my local smaller clinic, antagonist, high doses, microdose Lupron flare, and I got 1 abnormal 4AA blast, and I'm bummed. Well, I recently did the receptiva test, and my results came back positive for endometriosis and a potential polyp. My question is, do you feel like I should, number 1, do another round of IVF at a more reputable clinic with a top-notch lab to bank embryos and then do a depot Lupron prior transfer? Do a laparoscopy to remove the endo in hopes it will then help out quality, and do IVF, try naturally, since we can get pregnant on our own and have no male factor infertility. I am so torn. I am feeling the endo caused my 3 miscarriages last year and also may be impairing quality. Okay, listen to your ovaries, listen to your gut. Yes, I think you're right. It's very possible that endometriosis is causing this, especially if it might be causing something called adenomyosis, which is basically like endometriosis in the walls of your uterus. So go through the angel approach, right? We already know your AMH is low. So what does that mean? If your AMH is low, it means that there's a higher chance the egg quality might be lower as well. So let's deal with the egg quality before you start your IVF. Consider supplements like CoQ10, NAD, pterostilbene, acai berry, resveratrol, something like that. Make sure you're taking a nice prenatal, good prenatal with fish oil, vitamin D. Make sure you're checking your vitamin D levels and that your D is high enough. Ask your doctor if they think that DHEA is something that you should consider. Since you have endometriosis, add N-acetylcysteine and Ovasitol, and ask your doctor if they would consider using HGH for you. And if you were my patient, what I would talk to you about is also making sure we did enough genetic testing like chromosome analysis and carrier screen, and certainly bank embryos. You are only 28 and your AMH levels are healthy enough for me to say that it sounds like we could still maybe get a few eggs each batch. And I wouldn't necessarily do the laparoscopy first. I would say let's embryo bank first. And then if you were a patient of mine, I would say let's consider doing implantation testing second, do the ERA and Receptiva, and then third, do the embryo transfer. So IVF for me is a 3-step or stage process. Step 1, embryo creation after we know the diagnosis. Step 2, preparation, and step 3, transfer. And so what you're thinking is very similar to what I would do, but I would say probably makes sense to do the IVF first rather than the laparoscopy first. And I know that you're trying naturally and you're getting pregnant, but I would say those pregnancies are telling you a story and they're telling you to pay attention. They're telling you to do maybe more testing like chromosome testing, autoimmune testing, anatomy evaluation, for example. At the same time as the laparoscopy, I would also do a hysteroscopy as well. Okay, guys. Now let's go to your live chatted questions. Let's see here. I'm going to start at the top. Thank you guys for still joining me. I love doing these sessions. It's super fun for me. Someone's complimenting me on my new shirt. My sister was trolling me and saying, dude, do you only have a blue shirt? I'm like, yeah, that's all I have here. I just have a blue shirt. I wear my scrubs and I change my blue shirt and I change back into my scrubs. So yes, I only have a blue shirt. So here's a question. I had a laparoscopy done yesterday and they found some endometriosis after losing my 2 embryos. I'm told I can transfer next cycle. My RE wouldn't change my protocol with ganirelix, estrogen patches, and endometrium and PIO. Do you think I should add something more for the endometriosis? And the answer is yes. If you were my patient, I would consider adding CoQ10 during your transfer protocol, as well as N-acetylcysteine, and I would also have you take letrozole 2 tablets per day until you start progesterone. I've had excellent success with that. Next question. Let's see here. How much vitamin D should we take daily while pregnant or trying to get pregnant? I think it just depends on your vitamin D level. Checking your vitamin D is super, super easy. So get your vitamin D level checked. I want your vitamin D level to be as close to 50 as possible, but even over 30, I'm super happy. And I think that what people do is they get their D up, they stop their D, and then guess what? It goes back down. So I think it's important to keep taking your D during pregnancy. I'm 28 years old. My husband's 30. My AMH is 5.5. 3 failed medicated cycles, 3 failed IUIs. Moving forward with IVF. Small possible polyp found during sonohysterogram. RE doesn't recommend removal doing this during size and location. Thoughts? Okay, guys. Have you guys seen that show Wipeout? You guys know what I'm talking about? They're not filming any new episodes right now. But you know that person. They're at the end of the line. And then they're about to like go across the obstacle. And then a big ball just comes right in front of them and like wipes them out. Okay? Like that's what a polyp is to a teeny, teeny, tiny microscopic embryo, okay? Polyps are these, it's like Mount Everest. Like you can't see an embryo with your eye. So a polyp to an embryo is like, wow. Is it possible the polyps don't make a difference a lot of the time? It's very possible, but when you've worked your butt off, when you're like me and you woke up at 5:30 this morning to go do an egg retrieval for somebody, let me tell you, if there's a polyp in there, I'm gonna be like, you belong in a jar. You do not belong in my patient's uterus. I do that. And I talk like that too in my office. So yes, I would remove the polyp. Polly the polyp belongs in a jar. And I'm sorry if anyone here is named Polly. I love you still. Like, sorry. You don't belong in a jar. Polly, you don't. And one of my great friends, her name is Polly. Okay. Thank you guys for all the sweet comments. Here's another question. I'm on day 10 of my cycle and wondering if I still have a chance to start my transfer on this cycle or if I have to wait till cycle day 1 to begin meds. And the answer is you cannot transfer this cycle unless you're doing a natural cycle transfer and you have regular periods. Otherwise, wait until cycle day 1 or 2. That's when you start your medications to get your lining ready. And you take estrogen and then estrogen and progesterone. And let me tell you that estrogen makes you cuckoo. So super important to talk to your doctor about what you need to do and know before you take the estrogen. So what I tell my patients is when you take estrase or estrogen, I've taken over your cycle. And also that means that you might start to feel a little bit more emotional. You might get a headache, a little nauseous, egg white cervical mucus. You might feel like you're ovulating, but you're not really ovulating, but you're going to come in and check to see if you're ovulating. And I tell my patients life as usual. You can have sex, you can drink coffee, you can have alcohol in moderation, you can exercise, like all that stuff you would normally do, you can do. And your period will not start when you normally expect it because I've taken over your cycle. That's my blurb on estrogen. I know you didn't ask me that, but I just decided to say that. Okay, someone's talking about duo stem. Yes, How do you think, why, something about DNA fragmentation. If there's a problem in DNA fragmentation, can this sperm be able to develop blastocysts and pass the Pcos testing? Okay, that's the thing. So that's the confusing thing about DNA fragmentation. You can have a beautiful embryo that has normal chromosomes, and if the sperm that it came from had high DNA fragmentation, that embryo will have a lower implantation rate. And that's what's really annoying, because you would have wished you had known before you had made those embryos, so you could have done something to improve the DNA fragmentation. And now you have these frozen embryos, and you're like, well, now I have to keep transferring to find out if any of them are going to work. And we know that the live birth rate is lower if the sperm has a higher DNA fragmentation test. Does everyone need a DNA fragmentation test? No. But if you've ever been told unexplained, if your partner's over the age of 40, if he drinks alcohol more than in moderation, if he's a smoker, if he's overweight, if he has diabetes, chronic medical problems, on medications, it's basically a lot of my patients. Like my mug? I like it. It's pretty cute. Someone just gave that to me this week. So yeah, that's why I think DNA fragmentation is helpful. Okay, let's see here. Hi, Dr. Aimee. If I did a natural FET and ERA came back as pre-receptive and it didn't work, for the next protocol, would you recommend a medicated cycle knowing that you were pre-receptive? No, you can still do a natural FET. Just make sure that you take the trigger shot at the right time. There's a website you go to from the Igenomics website, and it tells you based on the number of ERA hours that you have identified exactly when to take the trigger shot for your planned transfer day. It's not rocket science, you guys. If it was, I wouldn't be doing this. It's quite straightforward. So it doesn't mean that you have to do a medicated cycle next time. However, if your doctor thinks that you should, listen to your doctor. Your doctor knows way more than I do. I had a 4-centimeter cyst in my last cycle when I did my egg retrieval. However, the cyst was drained during the egg retrieval. Will the cyst come back later, and do I need to worry about it anymore? Yeah, sometimes simple cysts do come back, and so, you would just monitor it and see, and if it came back just a little bit and wasn't secreting hormones, it's not a big deal. If they drained it and it was endometriosis, I imagine that they would have told you at the time, so you would have known that it was endometriosis, and then you might want to know that before you transfer. Okay, here's a great question. In an ideal world, ideal world, I'm fantasizing right now about an ideal world. I have so many things that would be in my ideal world. How many genetically tested normal embryos should I have frozen before I start transferring? I'd love 2 kiddos. So I really think it just depends on your age and how old you'll be at the time when you're ready for your next baby, and what your fertility would be like at that time. And those are the kinds of things that I plan out with my patients. I have patients that come in and they're like, I'm 39 years old and I want 4 kids, but I don't want to do IVF and I don't want to do egg freezing and I don't want to adopt. I'm like, then how are you going to have 4 kids? Tell me. And then I teach them about fertility and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't know that. Why didn't I know this? Why am I finding this out at 39, right? I do this stuff every single day. So that's why I do this show. And maybe I should be doing it every single day so people know about this stuff. But, if it's 2 kids and you're 37 and you went through a cycle and you have 2 embryos, then I would say maybe do another cycle. If it's 2 kids and you did a cycle and you're 32 years old and it's just tubal factor, and then you probably don't need to do another cycle right now and you can wait and then transfer again in 2 years. Then if you needed another embryo, you could do another cycle then. So those are the kinds of things that I talk about with my patients. I take their AMH, their age, I kind of predict how things are going to fall over time, and then kind of plan out their pregnancies like that. And of course, you can never plan a pregnancy. You can you can barely plan anything right now, like a wedding. You can prepare for pregnancy. So we do our best to prepare for pregnancy and see and make sure that we've, is Goldie safe? Yes, Goldie is safe from the zombies. Goldie is the name that I have named Caroline's egg. Okay, do endometriomas go away on their own? I had a 13 millimeter one and now it's gone. I've been doing monitored ultrasounds, things. So the answer is endometriosis is hormonally sensitive. So what you can see is sometimes during the cycle, it does this and then like that and then like this and like that. And so different times of the cycle, you'll feel like, oh my God, my endometrioma disappeared. And then at ovulation time, you're like, oh shit, it's still there. And that's what I say. I'm like, oh shit, it's still there. I thought it was gone, but it's still there. And I hate endometriomas. I hate endometriosis. I hate a lot of things. Recurrent pregnancy loss, endometriosis. We should just have a show about all the things that I hate. And endometriosis is definitely at the top. Actually, recurrent pregnancy loss is at the top of the list, then endometriosis, or negative pregnancy test, then endometriosis, then age-related infertility, and the list goes on and on. How much progesterone is given daily in a medicated cycle without the ERA test? Okay, so with progesterone, I like to give around 50 to 100 milligrams per night, starting about 6 days before transfer in different forms. So you can do an injectable form, or you could do endometrin 3 times a day. And I have all my little tricks and things that I tell patients, and I can tell you right now. So for progesterone and oil, I'll just share with my tricks. I'll share you my tricks. I don't even know if that makes sense. I'll share my tricks with you about progesterone and oil. So number 1, ice the area first, or heat it first and heat it afterwards. You can also use heat or ice afterwards. And some patients say heat is better than ice, and some patients say ice is better than heat. So you got to figure out what's right for you. Heat the shot first, meaning you can draw up the syringe and wrap it in a heating pad, or just sit on it, just like make it nice and cozy, or put it in your armpit and warm it up first before you do the injection. After the injection, don't freak out if when you remove the needle you see blood dripping out or oil dripping out. That's called normal. You just have a little gauze ready and just smack it on your butt. And then if you have a partner, great, just give them their cabana boy duties and their massage parlor duties and have them start massaging your butt, but tell them not to get any frisky thoughts. No, I'm kidding. They can get frisky thoughts. That's okay. It's allowed if you're my patient. So you can use a hand massager, one of those vibrating ones, or heck, I'm sure you can use a vibrator too, and just kind of vibrate it over your butt to kind of loosen up the gel or the oil. You know what I'm talking about. And then I always tell my patients to make sure you have Benadryl cream at home for even your IVF shots. So Benadryl cream to, like, if you have itching around an injection site or injection site reaction, especially if you develop highs on your buttock, that's something that can help. I know you didn't ask that, but I told you. Doctor, please, taking prenatal vitamins for 4 months now. What should I do to stop? What should I do? Stop? Yeah, please keep taking them. Hi, Alexandra. I don't know anyone who reads aloud at the speed that you do and doesn't miss a beat. Sandy, my butt's asleep. I've been sitting here for almost 2 hours. That's why I'm reading so fast, because I can barely feel my toes right now. AMH of 1.79, estradiol 74, 44 years old, who has not started supplements, trying to conceive, regular BMI, but on Synthroid, as I had a thyroidectomy in 2008 on vitamin D3. Okay, that's pretty awesome. If you're 44 years old and your AMH is 1.79, I can tell you this, repeat it. Repeat it, because it might be a lab variation. Don't be under the impression that it's truly 1.79, because I've seen that a lot. And if it is 1.79, don't just walk. Don't just trot. Run to an IVF center. Run to a fertility clinic. Run to someone who believes in your fertility and get some embryos made, because you are so lucky at 44. All the other 44-year-olds are like, oh my God, she's so lucky. And I'm like, you are so lucky. Like, so lucky. But at the end of the day, it's about, right? Quality over quantity, but still, more the better. So if you have it in you to do IVF, go do it. Get on your CoQ10 and go do it. What does an elevated prolactin mean? I have a normal prolactin. Don't worry about it then. If your prolactin's normal, you don't have to worry about an elevated one. But if you have an elevated one, it can affect your ovulation. It can affect progesterone secretion. It might be a reason to have a miscarriage. And it's very easy to diagnose, obviously, because you just get a prolactin checked. It's pretty easy to treat too. Next question, I'm starting my second FET today after a miscarriage in July. Any advice on how to thicken my lining? Starting letrozole 7.5 milligrams Saturday, but have had lining issues in the past. So I love that. Your doctor's being super creative. It sounds like they know you have a lining issue. It sounds like they're trying a natural cycle. So some things, if you have a thin lining, is maybe add injectables as well as just letrozole. So something that can help. Adding estrogen, doing early follicle checks, tracking your lining, and adding estrogen early on. That can sometimes help too. Supplements, L-arginine and vitamin E can also help with the lining. And then depending on your doctor's willingness to be a little bit more creative and how thin your lining is, if you've already ruled out Asherman syndrome and scar tissue, a couple other things to think about would be hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There is some evidence that might help thicken the lining. PRP infusion is not necessarily something that I do, but I know that there are centers around here that do it, and they've had success with it. HGH injection, believe it or not, HGH can potentially help with implantation as well. So those are the different things that might help with a thin lining, and I hope your lining thickens up and it's fabulous and all that wonderful stuff. Which prenatal brand do you recommend? I love Orthomolecular Prenatal. It has DHA, has more than any other prenatal in the world that I found. And if anyone finds one better than that, message me, because I want to know about it. Because I'm all about finding out what's the latest and greatest and the very, very best for my patients so I can share it with everybody, including you. Okay, here's another question. Total of 13 eggs retrieved, but 6 of them fertilized with grade A. Do you recommend genetic testing before freezing? Yes, I do, but ask your doctor too if they agree, because not all doctors agree with that. And it's just important for you to do what your doctor is good at in their lab. What does metformin do for IVF? Doctor prescribed it for my next IVF, but I don't have PCOS. That's a great question. I don't know. We used to give out metformin like it was water, like here's metformin. And then we're like, oh yeah, no, it doesn't really help much. But there are some situations where it could help. For example, if you have high testosterone for some reason and don't have PCOS, well, lowering your testosterone could maybe help with egg quality, maybe. If maybe you might have a very high egg count, maybe they think that you have some variants related to PCOS, and maybe taking metformin they think could maybe prevent, I keep saying maybe because I don't know the whole story, but maybe could prevent OHSS. So those are the kinds of things that maybe, I'll stop saying maybe, they're thinking about for you. But ask your doctor and be like, dude, like what's up? Like why the metformin? Okay, but don't say it like that. Be like, hi doctor dude. Okay, I had 2 failed 5-day transfers. I'm sorry. Should I do 2 embryos for the 3rd? And the answer is, have you done implantation testing? Yes or no? Should you think about doing another IVF cycle? Yes or no? Those are the questions you should ask your doctor. And at the same time, if you were my patient, and you guys know that I would have done the Egg Whisperer diet, and if I'm in that situation where I've done 2 transfers that haven't worked and now I'm on my 3rd, I'm going to be like this. And I'm going to do it again. Oh, God. That kind of stuff annoys the heck out of me. And yes, that's the point where we talk about transferring 2 embryos. And depending on how hard you've worked for those embryos, especially if you've gone through genetic testing, especially if you've gone through 2 cycles just to have 1 normal, that's when we start talking about maybe using a gestational carrier. So talk to your doctor about what would we do if this transfer didn't work? What would we do? Like just talk about it. Just say it out loud. So you've transferred the 2 embryos, then what would you do? And then maybe you should start talking about those things now. Like, oh, we would consider a gestational carrier. Oh, we would do implantation testing. Oh, let's do a natural killer panel. Like those are the kinds of things to talk about before you even transfer, especially if they're your last 2 embryos. Here's a great question. When do you suggest Lupron or microflare? My AMH is 4 and 2 rounds of IVF and ICSI, just had 3 eggs and no fertilized. Is an option for me. I'm sorry. That's really, really sad. So I don't know where you live, but if you're in the US with those units, AMH of 4 means a very high egg count. But if you're somewhere else, an AMH of 4 might mean a low egg count depending on the units. And if you just had 3 eggs and unfertilized, I'm really sorry. But I would ask your doctor, why they think they didn't fertilize. Was it an egg issue? Was it a sperm issue? Remember, embryo quality is related to AGE, your age, your genetics, and your environment. So look at both things for both the egg cell and the sperm cell. Address all of them. Make sure you're doing everything possible to be in the best shape of your life. And you know my thing, like CoQ10, supplements for both sides, DNA fragmentation, and then figure out why did this not work? Is it the sperm? Consider Pcos, zymote. Do you need a sperm aspiration? If it's the egg, is it time to consider egg donation? And there's some cool things that we can do now in cases like this where there's no fertilization. There's something called calcium activation. I've seen it work. Talk to your doctor about it. If they don't have the ability to do it, see if they will get the ability to do it. And if they don't feel comfortable with it, you don't want to teach people to do something that they've never done before. Spindle view is a cool technology that allows you to see the spindle inside the egg before you inject it with sperm. And sometimes you can learn a lot about egg quality by doing that. So that's another thing that you can see if they have. Someone asked, there's such a thing as too thick of a lining? And the answer is sure. If you have lots of polyps, sometimes it can be too thick of a lining. But if it's still fabulous and trilaminar and really beautiful and like that beautiful feather-like appearance, every time I look at a uterus, I see feathers. That trilaminar appearance? You guys, it looks like a feather, right? Like, I have to come up with a feather mnemonic. Like everything you need to know about your uterus. Feather. I don't see that coming anytime soon because that means I have to spell feather every time I talk about it. I don't have medical training, so please speak to your doctor before starting any supplements. I have PCOS and my prolactin was high. I started taking vitamin E and my prolactin is now normal. That is awesome. Yes, PCOS, women who have it have a higher chance of having elevated prolactin. And elevated prolactin, sometimes it comes down based on your cycle and medications you're taking. What medication do you recommend if 5 milligrams of letrozole and 150 milligrams did not work and it only gave me 1 follicle? So I would go up, I sometimes even go up to 10 milligrams of Femara, depending on what your FSH level is. See if your doctor would consider being more creative and doing the Femara and then adding in, jazz hands, adding in potentially like Menopur, Gonal-F, or Follistim, some sort of injectable along the way. So if you were a patient of mine in this kind of scenario, I would bring you in maybe on the 4th or 5th day of the Femara or Clomid. And I don't use Clomid, and I know you guys know that. And then have you come in, take a look at the number of follicles that are growing to even see if adding injectables makes sense, because I certainly don't want you to add them if it's going to be a waste of your time. Next question, is it okay to continue taking Ubiquinol during the transfer cycle in pregnancy? And for my patients, the answer is yes, especially if you have a history of PCOS, endometriosis, miscarriages. I say please continue taking your CoQ10 and please continue taking basically all your supplements except a few things. So I would say yes, but talk to your doctor first. Do you recommend acupuncture day of transfer? Absolutely. So there's a acupuncture center on the same floor as the IVF lab, and patients do a session 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after, and they love it. I have an A- embryo and a B- embryo. Should I transfer both embryos? I want 2 kids. I'm 39 years old, or should I just do another round of stim? Do another round. Yes. I had an IUI with Menopur. Last cycle, it failed. My AMH is 4.8 PCOS. Tubes, hormones, semen normal. I did the trigger shot, and now I'm on another treatment on my 2-week wait, and I had only 1 mature egg, size 23. Okay. I would say with that, I hope that you guys are successful. I mean, a mature egg at size 23 is pretty awesome. That's a juicy egg there. Okay, next question. 18 days post FET, HCG 300 day 10 and over 2000 day 16. I'm still scared. Ultrasound on the 25th. Should I be worried? You're always going to be worried. When you want something so bad, even when it works, even when you have a positive pregnancy test, the worry isn't over. So just keep going in, get monitored, get reassured, do your ultrasound, do an ultrasound a week or 2 later, and keep monitoring everything that you possibly can. Okay, let's see here. Keep going. Have you ever done IVF transfer for someone with atypical hyperplasia? And the answer is yes. I do maybe, I would probably say maybe 2 a year. And a lot of times we do the IVF first and then treat the hyperplasia and then get pregnant. But I always talk to experts in the field of hyperplasia. And so a lot of times the GYN oncologist or the gynecologist is treating the patient, and we come up with a plan together. It's not just one-sided. What protocol do you recommend for a 35-year-old with an AMH of 2.36, endometriosis, and multiple miscarriages, 1 natural live birth? Okay, so for 35 years old, AMH of 2.36 and endometriosis, so my endometriosis supplements, rule out the, go through my angel method or angel protocol or angel approach or workup for miscarriages. Make sure we're not missing a translocation, and then consider doing IVF, obviously with PGTA, and make sure we're not missing anything else like, a septum or something like that could get in the way, or let's say a hydrosalpinx from the endometriosis before transferring. So just be laser focused on the diagnosis. And it sounds like you know a lot about what's going on, but figure out the why behind the multiple miscarriages as much as you can, and then go through all those steps. Hi, doctor. My ERA is receptive. My BCL6 H score was 1.8. Side effects of Depo-Lupron, and you recommended add-back therapy. Should I still do 2-week Lupron overlap with autoimmune transfer protocol? Great question. So I will be publishing, with the help of a friend, a Depo-Lupron survival kit. It's nuts. That medication can be totally crazy, but a lot of patients, if you're warned about it, can totally deal with it like a champ. And so I don't necessarily add, if a patient's been on Depo-Lupron, I don't add the subcutaneous Lupron because I continue the Femera. I have patients take Femera every single day on the Depo-Lupron, and they continue the Femera until they start progesterone. So I don't necessarily think that everyone needs the Lupron shot, although I do have patients take the subcutaneous Lupron too. How do you tell if a patient has PCOS or non-congenital adrenal hyperplasia since some of the symptoms are the same? Well, you do a 17-hydroxyprogesterone level, so that's one way to know. And then I would refer the patient, because there's so many different forms of CAH, refer the patients to a medical endocrinologist to do all the workup for that for me to make sure that I'm not missing it. But a 17-OHP is a great test to do to rule that out. Okay, let's see here. Adenomyosis question mark. What's suggested with transfer? Also have low AMH 0.5 age 39. So with adenomyosis, you might want to consider, depending on the severity, doing Depo-Lupron first. Depending on the number of embryos you have, make sure you're making the right decision for your embryo. For me, I always tell my patients, I want you to be a mother with your own DNA. Although the experience of being pregnant is wonderful, it would be unfortunate for us to only have, let's say, 1 embryo and you have very severe adenomyosis, and I didn't have this conversation with you up front. What would we do if this transfer didn't work? I would recommend using a surrogate. So those are the important things to talk through with your doctor beforehand. If my AMH is 3.8 at 35 years old, what can I expect to be in 1.5 to 2 years when I'm ready to start trying for baby number 2? So if your AMH at 30 is 3.8 at 35, in 1.5 to 2 years, it's probably going to be, I think the AMH level probably drops. I'm not even going to try to do math right now. I'd probably say in about 2 years, it might be like 3.2. It's not going to be that much different. It's probably going to still be around 3. But at the most important predictor of egg quality is age, not the AMH. So I'll start my natural cycle transfer in approximately 10 days. Is it better to get the flu vaccine before or after the transfer? I recommend, this is just my thing, listen to your doctor. I recommend the flu vaccine before the transfer or after the first trimester. That's just my thing. When does implantation occur? Within 2 days of the embryo transfer. So you guys have heard that saying, hatch and attach, stick and grow. Hatch and attach, stick and grow. So the hatching and attaching usually happens and sticking and growing within 2 days of putting that embryo in. Okay. Is AMH 4.8 having PCOS? Not necessarily. You can have PCOS and have an you don't have to have PCOS if you have a high AMH. You can just be someone who was born with lots of eggs. For my IUIs, I had a lot of pain around ovulation. I'm worried about pain during my upcoming egg retrieval. Any advice? So the cool thing about the egg retrieval is that they're draining the fluid out of the ovaries, and so you're not going to have the same ovulation pain because the doctor's basically taking care of it for you when you're asleep. However, your ovaries do swell after the egg retrieval, so if you're a patient of mine, you know my IVF essentials. Heating pad, Motrin, Tylenol, whey protein, electrolyte-rich drinks, Gatorade, G2, Propel, coconut water, like all that stuff, and be sure to take a stool softener too so that you're not suffering. And then acupuncture can work as well for pain. I had an ERA test. Let me just drink some of my coffee here. Excuse me. Okay, I had an ERA test and results found plasma cells, and I took antibiotics for 2 weeks. The doctor doesn't want to retest, so I'm assuming I swallowed a zombie frog. I'm assuming I'm in the clear for my embryo transfer. And the answer is yeah. I think you can assume that. Some doctors like to do a repeat biopsy just to make sure the endometritis is cleared, but talk to your doctor about that and see if they want to do it. Excuse me. How long do you recommend that I lie down after inserting a progesterone capsule? I don't tell my patients to lie down, but ask your doctor that question because they might have an idea as far as why they would want you to lie down. Greetings, Dr. Aimee. What's your take on glutathione and NID push? Any benefits improving egg quality? Glutathione I've actually known totally disrupt cycles. I've seen patients stop ovulating completely on glutathione, so I don't recommend it. I've actually had quite a few patients do that. And NAD, I think NAD push, maybe you're meaning NAD IV, but I recommend NAD to everybody. I think it's magical. How long after a positive pregnancy test should we go see an OB/GYN? Well, if you know me, I want everyone to be seen around 6.5 weeks of pregnancy. If you have a history of ectopic pregnancy or miscarriage, maybe even sooner to rule out an ectopic pregnancy. The name of the prenatal is Orthomolecular Prenatal. And then how you put your questions in your page. So go to asktheeggwhisperer.com, and then you'll see. It's a form, and you just fill out the questions. It's really easy to do. I have an AMH of 4.6. I'm 38 years old. FSH is 4. My estradiol is 243. Not sure my LH, but I have 2 failed IVF cycles. First got 3 blasts, second no blasts. I always get a whole bunch of eggs, but most immature and don't fertilize. So I would consider a hybrid cycle. So what I mean by that is start off with fertility pills like Clomid or Femera. I use Femera. This way, since you have so many eggs, your doctors are going to be less afraid of OHSS. They'll stimulate less eggs, and then you can use a higher dose of the trigger shot and get more mature eggs and grow your follicles to, like, let's say 22 millimeters or 24 millimeters, and maybe consider a double trigger shot, double dose of the trigger, like 20,000 units. That's something that I would do. I don't necessarily know that you need an egg donor. However, if you've had 2 cycles, 3 blasts, and the second no blast, I feel like, obviously you're learning that there might be an egg quality issue, but it might take 1 or 2 more cycles to be successful. And I wouldn't necessarily say just based on 1 cycle of no blast that it means you need an egg donor. However, if you're ready for egg donor, you're like, I'm just so over this, I'm just ready to move on and be a parent, then yes, you can totally use an egg donor. You don't need anyone's permission. I have patients who are like, why would I even cycle myself and put myself through that when the chances are lower? I would just use an egg donor. There are people that make that choice for themselves. Any suggestions for Hashimoto patients to have successful implantation or transfer? Yes, I would say, work with your medical endocrinologist. Make sure you're tracking and trending your TSH and all your thyroid levels very, very carefully. As soon as you start estrogen, realize that your thyroid levels might change. As soon as you're pregnant, realize your thyroid needs might change. And that's, I think, the key to success. How many pills of nicotinamide should I take per day? 300 milligram tablets? 1. That stuff is like, it's like energy. It's like a jolt of energy. So I always recommend 1. I've been reading lots about the importance of a balanced vaginal microbiome. Do you think that the frequent interventions weekly, sometimes more, could be disrupting that delicate balance? I think I know what you mean. Frequent intercourse could be disrupting that balance. It's possible. Yeah, I think it's possible. And I don't recommend a certain probiotic. I wish I knew of like, I know there are people out there working on like, you know, a microbiome for fertility, a probiotic for fertility patients, and I'm sure it's coming soon. My RE told me that he will not test for adenomyosis, excuse me, because the only intervention is hysterectomy. Well, that's not very nice. I don't like that word. That's a very dirty word around here. I swear to God. I think I will live through this. I promise that you guys, I'm sorry that you guys have to listen to me coughing here. I'll share my Depo-Lupron survival guide that a friend of mine made for me very soon. So this is a great question. Can PCOS affect egg quality and why? And the answer is yes. So if you have PCOS, the reason why it can affect egg quality, I think, is if you haven't balanced. One of the reasons is that you might get a lot more immature eggs than mature eggs. And when you have so many eggs, a lot of times we're so scared that patients might get severe OHSS that we don't get as many mature eggs as the number of follicles the patient has. So it's not so much that you have lower quality eggs, it's more about egg maturity. And so while you might have so many follicles, you might not be getting as many mature eggs out, and that can be very frustrating. You can also have an egg quality issue. It doesn't mean that PCOS patients also have all have egg quality issues. That some PCOS is different for everybody. Like everyone's PCOS is, there's so many different various forms of it. And for some people, it could also mean an egg quality issue too. Let's see here. Do you recommend an infertility doctor in Bakersfield? I do. Dr. Acasio is one of my favorites, and he has an office in Bakersfield. He's wonderful. I've done one egg retrieval, and I have one embryo not tested for AA. Should I do an ERA before a FET? I've never been pregnant before. My lining was always good for IUIs. The answer is yes. Please consider doing that. I'm pregnant and 42. How long after I give birth can I start IVF safely? Wouldn't it be awesome if you could like do IVF somehow when you were pregnant? I mean, like that would be incredible. Unfortunately, we can't. And so I tell patients like about 6 weeks after you've delivered, see how you feel, especially if you're going to be 43 when you've delivered, get your Amh level checked, and then come on in and let's see if we can get some embryos. It's obviously not something that patients will want to do, but some people are very motivated to do that. Someone's saying, I'm really confused about my day 3 labs. My AMH is 4.2, estrogen is 75, and FSH is 9. Can you help me understand how all these can be high at the same time? I'm 36. Well, yeah, your FSH level isn't necessarily high. FSH fluctuates from cycle to cycle. Just that one snapshot in time doesn't mean that those are your levels. I would just repeat them again and see what the trends are. You can have a lot of eggs and might have egg quality issues, and it could be that's why your FSH level is a little bit higher, but I'm not too worried about it. I would just say that this might be a sign that you might want to consider doing something to preserve your fertility, like embryo creation, freezing, or baking. My embryo transfer is scheduled for this upcoming Monday. Yes, I'm totally sending you my positive thoughts and energy. What routine do you recommend after transfer? So I tell you there's a website, it's called Cabana, IVFCabanaboy.com. You can rent one for 2 days if you don't have one at home, or Cabana Girl. But that's what I do after the transfer. Right now, because of COVID, I have my patients bring their partners up on FaceTime, and I do my talk about, how you can't lift a finger, that my patient can only open their mouths to eat food, that if they're going to eat grapes, that they must be fed to them and peeled perfectly. Yeah, but in all seriousness, I want you to just rest and relax after the transfer. I tell my patients to take it easy. Don't do anything that's too strenuous. But at the same time, you can move, you can walk. And I tell my patients don't do any heavy lifting and don't exercise. Then you can increase your activity after the transfer. And then with a positive pregnancy test, in some patients, I say you can have sex and you can increase your activity and do heavy lifting. Okay, this is a great question. How do you know if you're a good candidate for a natural transfer cycle? Why do people choose this option? I think it's a conversation between the patient and the doctor, and some patients are good candidates, and some patients aren't. So someone who is a good candidate for natural cycle transfer is someone who has the flexibility to do it that way. Someone who has very regular cycles, who knows exactly when she's ovulating, and it's pretty predictable. So that's who. Let's see here. Oh, doctor, say hi to him for me. Don't stimulate at all on aggressive stimulation protocol. and I'm 35. My doctor is recommending donor eggs, and my AMH is 0.4. Does this make sense to you? Well, I would say, what's your FSH level? And let's put that together with an AMH and repeat your AMH. And if your doctor put you on birth control pills before stimulation, that might be the issue and why you're not stimulating well. And I would suggest that maybe you consider a natural cycle transfer, getting a second opinion, and seeing if your doctor's open. It doesn't mean you have to change doctors, but see if your doctor is open to other approaches and other protocols. Someone's asking, how can you improve egg quality? And what I tell people is, unfortunately, egg quality is one of those things that we may not be able to improve. However, there are some people who respond really well to supplements. And I wish I knew why some people responded well and did better on them and other people didn't. But I would say that taking them doesn't hurt. As long as they don't upset your stomach or you have side effects, I suggest taking things like CoQ10, as you guys hear me talking about. Okay, guys, I made it. I got through all of the questions. And my nose is running, and I think you can probably tell, and that's okay. Okay, last question here. Progesterone levels were high on the first attempt of my ERA cycle, so they canceled it. Second try, high again. Thoughts? So first of all, your progesterone level could be high because of vitamins that you're taking. We know that vitamins can interfere with the progesterone assay. We also know that women who take DHEA, for example, that can also cause the progesterone level to be high. I wouldn't sweat it, honestly. I would say that it might just be something that's related to something that you're taking in some sort of lab variation. And in a case like yours, when I see that, I would do this, and then I would say, guess what? Maybe in a different lab, your progesterone could be lower. So I would say, if I sent your labs out to Quest, I would say, let me see what your labs look like with LabCorp. And sometimes you'll see that progesterone level is actually different in a different lab because of a different way that they do things. It's kind of trippy like that, but you can be a little bit more creative about stuff and see if that helps. Well, thank you guys for joining me on today's show. I really appreciate it. AskTheEggWhisperer.com. You can go to that website, enter your question, and from here on out, what that means is I will never miss a question, ever. And for those of you who sent the questions in and I missed the question, please don't get mad at me. Please, please, please. You probably emailed me your question. Just cut and paste and put it into the AskTheEggWhisperer.com. I will be back here, and I imagine I will be back in the same dress because it's here in my office with my dear friend, Catherine D'Ogarte, tomorrow at 5 p.m. So we're going to hang out. We're going to answer your questions again. So if you have more questions that you want answered before next week's Ask the Egg Whisperer, this is the perfect time to send them in. And thank you guys for joining me. Thank you guys for still showing up, for still wanting to be parents. Because my God, this shit is hard. There's just so much hard about what's going on in the world right now. And for each of you that are still watching and still listening and still trying to learn because you want to be parents, I freaking love you. And why do I love you? Because we need more mothers, more fathers, more parents like you to fill this world with love. Because right now, there's a whole bunch of zombies outside. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, Google San Francisco air quality and click on the word image, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. Because it's just kind of crazy around here. So thank you guys again for watching. I hope you'll join me tomorrow, and I love all of you guys. And I wish and hope and pray that everything that you do is going to be successful and that your roadmap to success is a very smooth one and less bumpy because of the things that you hear on this show. Okay? Have a great night, you guys. Love you all. Bye-bye.